What's up, fellas? I got another fun one for you today. Whenever I make Q&As, I like to include some actionable, simple stuff to make working harder fun, and then some practical food for thought to just improve your training in general. Today, specifically, we're talking about getting bigger, more stacked, stout, succulent legs.
Nothing compares to squats.
Then I have a hot take of my own before I get into you guys' questions and hot takes, specifically pertaining to something I think most people are avoiding in their leg training for no good reason, and I'm gonna make a case for that. We're gonna get right into it with the fun one first to break the ice. It's gonna be a new way of doing cluster sets. Now, if you haven't caught my original cluster sets video, you could watch that after this one, but just briefly, some of the strongest, most jacked people in the world do cluster sets. It's a good way of getting in more work in less time, building your work capacity. And it's just a fun way to spice up your training. Leg blasters, that's what we're gonna talk about specifically for leg training. With leg blasters, the way that I program them, you do an AMRAP set, so as many reps as possible to failure with like leg extensions, sissy squats, hamstring curls, or hip thrusts. That's how I like to break it up by muscle group, so quads, hamstrings, glutes. After you do that, you rest like a minute, no more than that, because you don't wanna completely rest your muscle. After you rest about a minute, you have just enough juice to commence the leg blaster beatdown. And that's just my classic 5 reps, rest, 5 reps, rest, 10 seconds in between sets for 5 to 7 minutes. Start with maybe even 3 if you're new to something like this, because this is a very intense training strategy. And it combines really 2 cool things that I'm a big enjoyer of: pre-exhaustion and cluster sets. So try that out. I've had some reps and sets on the screen and examples that you can follow. All right, now what's the underrated portion? Like, what is the exercise that we're skipping that we should be doing? It's Bulgarian split squats, man. Now, there are some people that don't do them because they say things like, oh, it's too unstable, instability is bad for hypertrophy. Here's my hot take and where I'm gonna give y'all actionable advice. If you find a movement that is a little bit unstable, but it comes with a host of benefits that you can't find on another exercise, that exercise that is unstable is worth doing, and it will get you jacked, and here's why. A little bit of instability on an exercise to the point where you can still load it heavily is gonna actually do a lot of good things for you. Number one, it's gonna force better bracing. Because you have to move slower, you're slowing the rep down, you're gonna have time to think about things like, am I bracing? Also, because you're slowing the rep down, that's a better eccentric is better hypertrophy. And that's the whole reason why you're doing these assistance exercises, to get more jacked, more muscle mass, to get bigger and better at your squats. Bulgarian split squats also specifically are very customizable. You can do them with a quad bias, you can do them with a glute bias. So they add variety to your accessory game as well, especially for you fellas that train at home. And also the cardiovascular aspect of it, which is the main reason why people don't do them, is a tremendous reason why you should be doing them. Better mental toughness, better work capacity. All of that is going to increase your ability to squat more, squat better, even squat for more volume. Holy shit, fellas, this sun. I'm gonna be taking my hat on and off like that TI meme where every time you see him, his hat moves around. I'm gonna be doing that, and it's just simply because the sun's getting in my eyes. But the first question is gonna be a really interesting one that is very relatable to a lot of people, so we're gonna talk about this. How much exercise variety is too much? I like to break it down like this, man. How many things can you do well? Doing something well means you're training it hard in the capacity of an accessory exercise. So we just talked about with your strength training, you need to pace that shit out. But with your hypertrophy exercises, more than likely the best thing to do is gonna be to follow like a beat the books, double progression, dynamic double progression, rep goal system, any of these things that pace out volume and allow you to work hard, close to failure. If you're training close or to failure on an exercise, per muscle group, you shouldn't need to do much more than 1 or 2 accessories. There's no reason for you to be doing a whole lot of different things at once. So that's how you know. Am I doing this well? Am I progressing with it? If I am and I'm doing these things, odds are you don't need to add very much more. Here's y'all's first hot take, and this is gonna come from my boy Dennis.
Look, goddamn, look how juicy that looks. Ah!
He says that you shouldn't be cutting within your first 5 years of training if you're not obese. Someone asks me, should they bulk almost every day? And it is always someone that should be bulking. It's like this weird Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing. People that need to cut they know they need to cut and they don't need to ask that. But people that need to bulk, for some reason, if you're on the lighter side and you have no muscular definition, you are not going to acquire that muscular definition by becoming even smaller. You need to acquire some muscle mass that is going to build your physique and show your muscles off. So if there's nothing inhibiting you from doing that, if you're asking me, should you bulk? The answer is yes. All right, this next question's a fun one. This fella is really enjoying full body training for his hypertrophy, but he's wondering how he can continue to do that once his goals are strength oriented. I could talk about myself to answer your question. So there's a couple different ways that you can do it. One is gonna be closer to what you're doing, and one's gonna be farther away from what you're doing currently. So if you have a strength itch, what I'll say is, man, pick one movement and then strength train that movement. It could be a weighted pull-up, overhead press, whatever the case may be. Something that's not gonna take away from your hypertrophy training in terms of everything that you wanna do with that. That's gonna be pretty similar to what you're doing. So like if you had to strength train an overhead press, that's not gonna take away from anything else that you're doing because it's not taking away from what I'm doing. I'm doing some overhead press training in the background that I'm gonna make a video on after I'm completed with it. But on the opposite end of that, more strength specific on multiple lifts and powerlifting, SBD days are very popular, sometimes too popular in my opinion. That's pretty much just a day where you're allocating almost everything to practicing skill with that movement. SBD days are very long, they are very fatiguing. You're gonna be in the gym like 2-3 hours, depending upon what you're, how strong you are, how long you have to warm up for, things like that. But yeah, man, like I said, just take any strength training program, do that with that movement and then keep everything else the same, or go on like the squat, bench, deadlift side of things where you're doing like a top set, back offs, top set, back offs, top set, back offs, and then maybe like one accessory for your legs, and then you're out the gym. BQ says calisthenics don't count until you're 220 pounds. And then someone else said, relative strength is more impressive than absolute strength. Like I said, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, two similar opinions on opposite ends of the spectrum. Here's the thing, here's how I'll weigh in about that. All jokes aside, in terms of talking about absolute versus relative strength, it's on a scale. So you take Julius Maddox, for example, enormous bench press, one of the most large human beings on the planet. And then you take a fella that weighs like 140 pounds and benches 2.5 times body weight. You are a fucking fool if you think that that fella is anywhere near the caliber of lifter as Julius Maddox. It's just not even close because the difference in absolute strength is unfathomable. Julius is bench pressing weights where if that 140 pound guy even tried to unrack it, he would instantly harakiri himself, bro. Like, it'd be a wrap for him. Now on the opposite end of that, you take a fella, like for myself, for example, that's like 194 pounds. And I bench, let's just say double body weight. And then you take a fella that is 300 pounds and only can bench like 400 something, like 420 something. I'm gonna look at that 400 pound guy like, bro, you're a chump. I'm a couple extra large pizzas away from mogging you really badly. This next one is gonna be somewhat of a bro talk, just simply because I need to talk about this, right? So this fella says that hip hinges are overrated for hypertrophy. No, they're not. I'm just gonna say it straight like that. There's no way to get around doing a hip hinge of some form if your goals are hypertrophy. How are you gonna work your spinal erectors? There's just so many muscles that are missing out if you don't do a hip hinge. People have to be very careful with the information that they consume and knowing, does this apply to me? This just encapsulates and is a microcosm of a conversation that my boy Sam and I have very often, wherein people take things like, don't do barbell rows if you don't want to overtax your back and you're doing deadlifts, and they take that as a reason to do something easier or to avoid doing something hard. Does that apply to you, right? So the deadlift example, are you overtaxing your back doing deadlifts and rows if you only deadlift 2 plates or 3 plates or even 4 plates? No, you're not. Or even 5 plates. If you're deadlifting 5 plates for a 1 rep max, you can still do barbell rows. You still should do barbell rows because that's gonna allow you to get a bigger deadlift. Things like that are taken from like very advanced lifters that are very strong at something, and they're thinking of more efficient ways to get in work without overtaxing themselves. So for someone like myself, barbell rows, if I'm deadlifting as much as I can to get better at that, may not be the best idea. Even in that case, you could make a case for barbell rows being like a light deadlift variation, bro. Like if you can deadlift 600 pounds, you're not gonna fucking overtax your back with 225, bro. There's no fucking way, right? So much the same, I bet, you know, there are a lot of people that heard conventional deadlifts are overrated for hypertrophy and just now have this opinion that all hip hinges are, you know, a waste of time or whatever the case may be. The basic movement patterns are basic movement patterns for a reason. You need to do them in some capacity, just like we talked about in the intro and squats. Last question is going to be a little different just because BQ got his time to shine in the middle of the video instead of at the end. I'm going to segue into a preview for a new video. It's just a question a fella happened to answer, where I talk about how to get a really freaky V-taper and what that looks like. This fella asks, will training my abs ruin my V-taper by making me look blocky in my midsection? I think it has the opposite effect, and this is where I'll talk about it a little bit and then just tell y'all to catch me in the next video later this week. But training your core, whether that's your spinal erectors, your obliques, your abs, is going to draw the eyes in, right? So you look at the big shoulders, the big lats, and you draw into the nice defined core. Whereas if your core is not developed, you're not going to get that same effect. So no, absolutely not. I think that's utter bro science in a bad way. This is all bro science, which isn't a bad thing, but it's like an equivalent fear of women who are worried about getting too jacked if they lift weights. You're not gonna accidentally get jacked, right? So much the same, you're not gonna accidentally get obliques that just protrude so much that you have a GH gut and your aesthetics are ruined. It's just not gonna happen. Fellas, this was a lot of fun. If you have any questions about these questions or hot takes, please let me know. If you have any questions for next time, please let me know as well. Watch these videos now that you've watched this one. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Have a great day.